For decades, China's sandstorms in the north had destroyed villages, homes, and livelihoods. In an ecological experiment that began in 1978, Chinese authorities attempted to reclaim and reshape the land that was written off as lost. Today, the fruit of the experiment is being hailed as an ecological miracle. Now there are forests, solar farms, and even bananas being grown where sand dunes used to dominate. But what are the hidden costs behind this miracle? The trade-offs, the risks, and how durable is this success? Our China correspondent Tan Si Hui traveled to Inner Mongolia for the story, and she joins me now. Si Hui, this program called the anti-desertification program, it's a bit of a mouthful. In a nutshell, what is it?
It is a mouthful. I mean, when I first heard the program's name, I also had to find out what exactly it meant. So first, desertification, it means land degradation, especially in dry regions. So it's caused by drought, climate change, or human activities like overgrazing, deforestation. This has led to dust storms that have buried villages and even nearby provinces like Beijing. So we know what means. So anti-desertification basically is talking about slowing down desertification or reversing land degradation. And this can be done by tree planting, regulating grassland, supporting local livelihoods so that people don't overuse the land by overgrazing the land. So the goal is really not to get rid of the desert, but really to lock the edges through vegetation. And this has been ongoing since 1978, this program, and China has been doing this for nearly 50 years.
Right. So, okay, just to be clear, it is not turning the desert into forest, right? It is just reclaiming what the desert has took away from former farming land, correct?
Oh, well, it has turned some of the desert land to forest, but it's not completely getting rid of the desert.
Right, okay. And your report covered a lot of dedication from people like the tree planters. Tell us a little bit about who they are. What kind of life are they actually living out there?
Well, they are one of the most interesting people. I think one of these tree planters that we featured, we discovered him through Douyin, which is the China form of TikTok. So he showed his life on Douyin, him planting trees, and it's quite interesting how they do it. So they scatter the grass on the desert land, and they would make it into such a thing called like a straw grid. And this is really to stabilize the sand dunes. And then they would plant the seeds or plant the shrubs within that straw grid. And so when I was really interested to know how they plant the trees, and so we decided to talk to them. And he described to us how he planted the trees. He described his life and how he started going about doing this. He came from a nearby province, Gansu, which is just next door to Inner Mongolia. And really, his main goal was to earn some wages because this project, it also pays an income to the people who plant trees. And so he was earning about 30 to 60 USD a day. He did talk about the difficulties also when he first started. There were like harsh conditions, strong winds, frequent sandstorms. So take a listen to what he told me.
Only people who are extremely resilient can do this kind of work. Every spring, we face strong winds and frequent sandstorms. Sometimes we have to live deep in the desert with no electricity, no water, and we have to truck water in ourselves. We live in tents, sometimes for 1 or 2 months at a time, completely cut off from the outside world.
So it has been some 47 years since the start. The program started in 1978. What are some of the key achievements that you saw for yourself when you went to Inner Mongolia?
So one of the key achievements I saw was desert becoming green forest. It's also called the Great Green Wall. So we know there's a Great Wall in China. This is the Great Green Wall. So literally, it is like a belt of forests that have become, the desert has become a belt of forests. And I was there. The trees were very tall. And I remember one man, he was telling me that he had first planted shrubs at the very beginning, and he has seen these shrubs become those tall, big trees. And he calls them his 绿色的孩子. So in other words, it's his green children. He's seen them grow up, and he's talking about how the forest coverage rate has increased to almost 14% today, up from 5% in the late 1970s. So that's one big achievement. Now the other achievement is this other Great Wall that they call it the Solar Great Wall. So there is a whole field of solar panels here at Inner Mongolia. So it not only supplies clean energy, it also stabilizes the dunes, the sand dunes. And one interesting thing is that below the solar panels, they also plant shrubs. And so it kind of grows beneath this solar panel, and the goal is also to increase the grassland, and there could be grassland growing. It could be that the desert becomes a grassland over the next few years. And one more technique is building roads to stabilize the sand dunes, and one official, Cao Jun, he did tell me about how this works.
After the road was built, we extended 50 meters on each side, laying down a gravel layer and conducting mixed planting trials. We then carried out hydro-seeding and manual sowing, and within these areas, we planted a variety of grass species in small experimental plots. Through this technique, we are testing which grass species perform best. What you see here has all been stabilized.
I mean, the numbers you're talking about is pretty impressive, from a success rate of 5%, and you say now it's like 14%, the growth of this green space. And, Cao Jun, of course, is also, sounds very proud of what they have done over the last 47 years. So since the project appears to be so on track, so successful, your story also talks about, people leaving, and many do. Why is that?
I mean, we talked to the tree planter. We've heard the conditions extremely harsh, and he talked about how only very resilient people stay. And many of these tree planters, they come from other regions. And as he had also mentioned, the local people, the local Inner Mongolian people, not many of them are willing to do this work because they are local herdsmen. And so most of the people come from outside regions. And he said that the most resilient ones come from mountainous areas like Yunnan or Sichuan, and they are used to hardship. So these are the ones who stay. And so it is very difficult to find people who are willing to do this job. But as I mentioned, local people not willing to do this job. But actually, I also spoke to somebody, a local person, Inner Mongolian person who was part of this project. He was willing to do this because as a local, he had seen how sandstorms had buried his own home. He couldn't even open his own door or go out to work. And so it was his own personal mission to try to see his home transform into a place where there are no longer that many sandstorms. And that's why he was part of that project. So the people who stay are also people who want to see the transformation to Inner Mongolia.
Right. Now, let's talk about one of my most favorite jaw-dropping moments in your story, right? Growing tropical fruit in the desert with winter temperatures of negative 30 degrees Celsius. But you talked about bananas. You talk about dragon fruit, in an arid desert. Now, when you saw that greenhouse, what was your first reaction? Were you amazed? Were you skeptical?
Yeah, so when I first heard of the greenhouse and the glass house, at first they were saying, we're growing strawberries and blueberries, so it wasn't just bananas and dragon fruit. I didn't know about this glass house at the start. So when they told me strawberries and blueberries, I was wondering, wait, you said you can grow strawberries and blueberries using desert land, and they said yes. Would you like to see? And I said yes, for sure. And when I went there, it was quite unbelievable. We saw bananas, because at the point of time they were growing bananas. I think it depends on the season as well. A whole greenhouse filled with banana trees, and so it was quite impressive. I talked to one of the local farmers, because one of the first questions would be, how did they plant the trees and the bananas? They did say that it took a couple of years of trial and error. The first year, all of their crops died. Subsequently, it was through planting of trees and grass, the soil, which means the desert sand, it became soil because they had they had planted trees and grass, which became organic matter, and then microbes started to form when leaves decomposed, and over time this sand became fertile soil. And so the next step would be to create a warm climate especially for tropical fruits, and so they relied on sunlight, and so therefore that glass house, also with plastic sheeting. And so that was what we saw eventually, with more than 30,000 fruits and vegetables growing there. And as you mentioned also, I got to try a banana, and it was actually even sweeter than what we eat in Singapore.
I have to take your word for it, because you actually ate the fruit. But even here, so far away from me, I can't help but being like a doubting Thomas about the whole thing, right? Growing tropical fruit in the desert. Is it actually practical? Or is it more a showcase to prove, sure, it can be done, but it's counterintuitive. It's like trying to outsmart nature instead of working with it. So my question still remains, a big why. And what do the people running it say about that?
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. The question is a big why, especially in such a place in Inner Mongolia. Why are you trying to grow tropical fruits or vegetables? Well, the farmer actually told me that the initial goal for this greenhouse or glass house was really to enrich the local diets, especially during winter, because vegetables were scarce and they had to be imported. And so this clean ecological zone provided the perfect environment for organic planting. So at the end of the day, again, this idea of green development isn't just about planting trees. It's also about ensuring that the livelihoods there are sustainable. And that's especially as locals, they don't get a big share of their income. They get a big share of their income through herding. And so when they've been asked to reduce herding, because it leads to land degradation, it's all about building this sustainable ecosystem. And so after the success of planting fruits and vegetables, these methods are then promoted to the farmers, who can then perhaps prosper further in the desert. And we found out that the fruits are already being sold as far as Hong Kong and Shenzhen in 2011, including watermelon. And so that farmer that I was talking about earlier, she was so proud of what she's done, especially since she was there since 2009, and she was one of the first teams to arrive to be part of that demonstration zone. So take a listen.
At first, it was just a job to survive, but over time, I developed a deep emotional connection with the plants, like raising children, watching them grow from seeds to fruit, and then hearing consumers say, these fruits grown in the desert are delicious. That sense of achievement is incredibly meaningful.
So you talked about the communities there who were then advised to, reduce the herding. So that to me is like a trade-off, right? The grazing limits, changes to traditional livelihoods. These are traditional herdsmen. Now, what's the impact here and the personal cost to these traditional communities?
So definitely there are trade-offs, especially when they're discouraged from herding, and possibly that's the only thing that they've known to do over at Inner Mongolia. So when they were discouraged, some reports have said that their traditional livelihoods are being displaced. Local ethnic Mongolian culture has also been lost to some extent. So there was some resistance at the beginning to this project, and even up till now, according to the reports. So what the Beijing government has tried to do is to give these herdsmen some compensation. So since 2011, Beijing has poured more than 150 billion yuan, or about 21 billion US dollars, into ecological compensation. But some of the analysts that we spoke to, they say that fiscal support is good, but in the long run, it may not be sustainable. So then it's really, again, as we mentioned earlier, it's about creating livelihoods for these farmers, sustainable livelihoods for these herders for the long term if they're discouraged from herding.
Right. So after everything that you saw for yourself, the success stories and even the uncertainties and the personal cost to some of these traditional communities, what's the biggest thing that could still go wrong?
Climate change. So the globe becomes warmer, more uneven, longer dry spells, maybe rainfall arriving late. One forest fire could even erase 10 to 20 years of such restoration work in a day. So heat waves, sudden cold snaps, when there's stronger winds and sandstorms, one researcher, he explains the possibility of what could happen.
可以举这么一个例子，就是说我们如果这一块是一块农田。
Let me give an example. Suppose this area is farmland. After spring plowing, when the crops have grown to this height, if a sandstorm hits, just one sandstorm, at least a third of the farmland will have its seedlings completely destroyed, beaten into mud and sand. As a result, survival rates are extremely low. To ensure higher survival rates, we introduced methods such as deep planting using water injection tools, essentially planting seedlings deeply with water guns while simultaneously supplying water. So, although planting shrubs like salix today may look easy, low cost and fast, the research behind it has been a long and difficult process. It's taken at least 40 to 50 years of accumulated experience and technical refinement.
So this project has gone on for decades, since 1978. Now, the target end date is 2050. Now, did you sense any fatigue, right, from workers, locals, or even officials on this project? And is there still real belief that this is worth the effort?
I don't know about them, but I felt fatigued when I saw them planting in the hot sun with the wind in their faces. But each of them spoke about their feelings of pride, having seen these shrubs become these big tall trees. So the tree planter earlier, when we spoke to him, he did say, I asked him if he's willing to allow his children to also do such work. And he said that if there's still more work to do, sure, he's happy for them to continue doing this work. And in fact, for him, if he's able to come back to see the areas where he had planted trees, it will feel like a full circle moment. He said it would feel like 特别完美. But of course, there's no green illusions if there's no local buy-in into this project. And if trees are just planted for the sake of planting to meet KPI, then this project would fail. So at the moment, we do know that technology is helping the locals and the workers to help allay some of that hard work, as we've talked about earlier, the tree planting. So we also featured some of these new technologies such as drones constantly being updated to help these workers plant the trees. Some of them improve planting speeds. They are able to resist stronger winds. They could even do the work for 15 people. So up till now, from now till 2050, the technology is definitely going to improve stronger plant species, better water irrigation. And so I can imagine China will be on track to meet that goal.
All right, Si Hui, thank you for that eye-opening report. Turning desert into forest, just like turning water into wine, sounds like science fiction or a miracle until you see it for yourself. What's happening in northern China shows what long-term commitment, technology, and human grit can achieve. The question remains whether this green transformation is truly durable, or whether climate change, human fatigue, rising costs, and policy shifts eventually expose its limits. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the CNA Correspondent podcast. It's brought to you by Clara Ong, Tiffany Ang, Nat Vetavero, Craig Dale, and me, Genevieve Woo. Bye for now.